You know, when you look at the world today with all the craziness that is going on around us, we all, I think, need to acknowledge that the government's not going to save us. Our parents aren't going to save us. Your friends can't carry you forever and probably don't want to save you. Bottom line is, if it's going to be, it's going to be us. And when you make that mental shift and recognize that no one owes you anything, something amazing happens. It forces you to stop looking outside of yourself and take responsibility for yourself and your own life in a way that's maybe you've never done before. And everything changes when you do. Today's guest is one of the most inspirational I've had on this show. His name is Kute Blackson, and he's coming up. Stay tuned to the One Simple Thing podcast.
It's time to build a better business by building a better you. This is One Simple Thing.
Welcome, everybody. It's Dave Kirby with you once again. Really glad you're here, and I think you're really going to be inspired and challenged by my guest today. His name is Kute Blackson. He's a best-selling author, transformational speaker, life coach, and entrepreneur. His book is called You Are the One, and it released in June. It shows us how to unlock our potential and live a life you love. It's available by clicking on the banner ad when you go to onesimplethingonline.com. Hope you'll do that. Let's get the show started. Kute, thanks for being here with me today on the One Simple Thing podcast.
Great to be here, man.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, same here. So your book is called You Are the One, and I just want to talk about that for a minute as an overall kind of theme, because if there was ever a message that the world needed today, right, it's that it's up to each of us. We can't sit around waiting on somebody else to fix our problems or to make our dreams come true. It's up to each of us, isn't it?
I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, you look at our world today and what's happening and the climate and the political climate and everything that's going on. The bottom line, the way I see it, the government's not going to save you. Your parents aren't going to save you. You know, your friends aren't going to carry you forever. Bottom line, if it's going to be, it's up to us. And I had this awakening many years ago when I was sitting in a tiny room with no money, mad at the world, mad at God, screaming at God, mad at my parents, mad at my dad specifically, because I felt like, you know, I was being true to my path and things weren't happening quite the way I wanted them to happen. And what I had to give up was my entitlement. And I realized I was so ungrateful for what I did have. And I had to give up the sense that, you know, that life owes me something. God owes me something. People owe me anything. When I made that shift that no one owes me anything, it really freed me up to stop looking outside of myself to be saved, looking outside of myself to be rescued. And it forced me to take radical responsibility for myself and my life in a way that I'd never done before. And it forced me to tap into my inner resources that previously weren't accessible to me. And I think that's the essence of the book. I mean, we can be inspired by the great ones. It doesn't mean we can't be supported, but I believe the universe supports those who support themselves, and we have to make sure that we're doing our part. Many times when I ask people, and people say, I've tried everything, my life's not working, I ask them, well, how many things have you tried, or how many people have you called, or, you know, how many times have you been rejected? And when they say they tried everything, they say, well, maybe like 3 or 2 people. I'm like, 2 people? Everything is like, if you told me like 400, you know? And so I think that shift is a profound step. And the great ones just show us, Dave, our own capacity for what is possible, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's Oprah, whether it's Will Smith, whether it's, you know, Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa. They're just, you know, they're inspiration showing us what we're all capable of. And just the fact that they were capable of it, I believe we're all capable of it. But to me, greatness is a choice. It's not something that is bestowed upon us by the heavens just mystically or based on the family or social structure you were born into. It's a moment-to-moment choice.
So your journey, and you kind of alluded to this, at 18 years old, you kind of made that decision that your life is your life and it's not up to somebody else, right? And that kind of began your journey?
Yeah, you know, well, you know, my father is a minister, and I always felt a calling to impact people's lives from a very young age. I'm talking 5-6 years old. I started to speak in my father's audiences when I was age 8. At 14, he made a decision for me and basically said, this is what you're going to be. And that was, I was given a mandate to take over my father's churches. Yeah, 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, hundreds of thousands of people, had a huge church, about 5,000-6,000 people in London in the 80s, and announced to everyone, my son's taking over. And to be honest, I didn't feel that was my path. I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't feel quite, it just didn't resonate as true for me. But, you know, being a 14-year-old kid, I didn't want to rock the boat. didn't want to upset anyone, and certainly didn't want to lose the love of my father. And I knew the truth in my heart, but I went along with it, and it burnt me up. The misalignment and the knowing of the truth, you could say, burnt me up, and so it took me 4 years to muster up the courage to reclaim my life, and had the conversation with my father when I was 17, 18 years old, and said, I'm not taking over, because what I realized was I could follow his trajectory, his wish for my life. And the reason I was afraid of telling the truth was, ultimately I didn't want to be outcast, didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to disappoint anyone, also didn't want to lose love, and didn't want to be alone. And I think many times these are the things that stop us. These are the fears that stop us from truly stepping into our greatness, stepping into our power. And this was true for me. But when I had the conversation with my father, I realized I could follow his path for my life and be successful by everyone else's standards. But if I don't have myself, if I don't have who I am, doesn't matter what I have in the external world, then I really have nothing, and I'm truly a failure. And so I made a decision that nothing and no one was worth compromising my truth. And otherwise, everything I build is based on a lie, will be a lie, and won't fulfill me anyway. And so left everything, and it wasn't easy. David, honestly, it wasn't easy. Sometimes there's this idea that we have when we follow our purpose, when we follow our truth. The universe opens, the heavens open, music plays, the angels float down, and everything, money drops from the sky. It's just easy and effortless. And sometimes I believe when you follow your purpose, life challenges you. Life tests you to, number one, see if you really are committed. Number two, you're sent tests and challenges and situations to test your emotional, spiritual, psychological muscle, which is just a preparing your character to be able to fulfill the vision you've been given. So I was sent a few tests, and was outcast, didn't speak to my father for a couple of years, was pretty much alone, but won a green card, ended up winning a green card in the lottery, literally the green card lottery, to come to the U.S., and that was for me a sign that I was on path.
As you're telling the story, I'm thinking to myself, when we're young, it's easy to let people push us into what they want us to be, right? But when you get to the end of your life and you're looking back with regret that you didn't follow your own path, those people aren't going to be there for you to blame at that point, right?
Yeah,
they're going to be gone. You're going to be all by yourself with your regrets, and so you might as well take responsibility for those now when you have time to do something about it.
I agree. That's why I like to ask myself, look, whose life are you living? Many times we think we're living our lives, but we're not. And, for me, one of the greatest inspirations, reminders, or let's just say motivations to not get caught up living someone else's life or someone else's desire for my life is constantly making, this might sound a little morbid, but it's not, but constantly making death my friend. Because when you kind of said, just alluded to it right now, we're all going to die. It doesn't matter if you're Bob Marley, Muhammad Ali, David Bowie, Bruce Lee, every one of us will die. We will face that moment. None of us know when that moment's going to come. None of us have any idea to predict that moment. It could happen today, tomorrow, 50 years from now, God knows with technology, 1,000 years from now. But at some point it will happen. And I think at the end of the day, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and make peace with the life that we lived. And we will never be able to go to God or our maker and say, God, hey, could you give me back those 5 years that I wasted in a relationship that wasn't right for me? Could you give me back those 5 years I wasted in a job that I totally hated? Could you give me back that time? There are no refunds. And I think when we remember death, not as some negative thing, but as a loving friend when we look death in the eye, when we face the reality that we will die and embrace it and have tea with death, so to speak, and sit with it and just keep it by our side. I think at least for me, it has the ability to motivate us to not waste time on petty stuff, on petty conversations and gossip, not waste time on other people's opinions, but it has the ability to get us really clear and discerning in terms of what's really important for our lives and to live it right now, because we have one opportunity at this thing.
In the book, you talk about something you call the free fall that really resonated with me. So there are these things that we want to do, and you made that decision at 18 that you're going to live your own life. And then you make that decision, you make the leap, right? And then it's that split second after you do it, and you're like, what have I done? Right? The panic almost that sets in. We all have to go through that when we finally make that decision to follow our own path, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, when we follow our own path, it can be scary because we're letting go of who we've been. We're letting go of what we know. We are finally telling the truth to ourselves, and it can be a little scary. And what I found is the mind will sometimes kick in, or often kick in, and go, "You're crazy! Oh my God!" And the mind will go 100 miles an hour, and it will convince you to stay in your comfort zone. It will convince you to not move forward. It will convince you of all sorts. It will sell you all sorts of BS, all sorts of lies, all sorts of stories, some of which might be somewhat rational and somewhat logical. But I found that if you listen, or if you live inside a limitation of the mind, if you listen to everything the mind says, you'll never reach your full potential. At least that's what I found for myself. And what I found too is just because a thought is in our mind, just because a thought is in your consciousness, in your awareness, doesn't mean it's real. It's just a thought. So I think what we have to start doing is cultivating a relationship with our mind, a relationship with our thoughts, so we're not letting whatever thoughts happen in that moment when we're leaping off the edge to stop us. It's okay to feel fear. It's natural to feel fear. In fact, I believe if you're not afraid or kind of feeling on your edge throughout life, probably your goals and your vision for your life is way too small for your soul, way too small, and we have to expand, because if you're growing and evolving, you're always going to be kind of feeling the sense that you're at your edge. You're at the edge of your own growth and expanding, and it might be scary, but there's a difference between that kind of soul growth, excitement and fear versus real danger of like being chased by a tiger. That's totally different, but many times we get them confused. So one of the myths is thinking that you need to get rid of your fear in order to take action. You need to get rid of your fear in order to live a fulfilled life. You need to get rid of your fear in order to succeed. And I believe that's not the case. You can feel the fear, you can embrace the fear, you can acknowledge the fear without buying into the mind, observe the mind. To me, the thoughts aren't what are important. What's important is your relationship with the thoughts and the importance you give them. And I think when you can realize, okay, the thought, just because the thought's in my mind doesn't mean it's real, you can start observing the thought. And that's one of the key things I found, to be able to just observe the thought, not try and change it, not try and fight it, but observe it. When you can observe it, you realize that you're not the thought. And when you realize that you're not the thought, you have a relationship with the thought, and then you can actually choose something differently.
Well, we're going to talk more about our relationship with our thoughts and our mind on the next episode. So we're bringing this one to a close here today, Kute. And we've talked about the basis of your book, You Are the One. We're taking responsibility for our own life. Where do we start with that today? I always like to end the show with kind of a one simple thing, action step. Is it just coming to that decision that I have to take responsibility for my own life?
Yeah, that's step one, and we might have to continue this part in the next episode. But what I will say is one thing that everyone must do, can do, if they choose to truly live a fulfilled life, is we must be willing to tell the truth to ourselves. One thing that keeps us stuck, I've worked with thousands of people, billionaires, celebrities, athletes. One of the things that keep us stuck are all the ways we lie to ourselves, all the ways we BS ourselves, all the ways we rationalize, settle, and ultimately don't tell the truth to ourselves. So I'd invite everyone, as we wrap up, just to ask themselves the question. Number one, where am I lying to myself? Where am I not telling the truth to myself? Where am I really lying to myself? What am I pretending to not know? What am I pretending to not know? What are the lies costing me? What are the payoffs for lying to myself? And the final two questions are, what is it I'm really afraid? What are the consequences I'm truly afraid of, or at least I think I'm afraid of? Because many times what we think we're afraid of is way more than the reality. And if we're able to face our fear, then it can free us up to take action. And the last thing is simply, what amazing thing might happen by telling the truth? What amazing thing, because sometimes we're so focused on the consequence and the fear that we forget huge breakthroughs, possibilities, joy, and abundance might be available. So I don't believe you can live a fulfilled, happy, authentic, thriving life without telling the truth. So ask yourself those questions, make a list of all those lies, and clean those up. And I think you'll start seeing shifts happening.
We will put those questions on the show notes for today's program, so you can access those. I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. But Kute, thank you. It's inspiring. It's challenging. This idea that, hey, nobody's coming to my rescue. It's me and only me that has to make that decision. And I hope people will take that to heart today. So thank you again for being with us. Can't wait for next time.
Awesome.
His name is Kute Blackson, and his book is called You Are the One. I'll tell you how you can get it in just a moment. But I don't know about you, but I've been challenged, and I have been inspired today to truly take charge of my own life and not sit around waiting for somebody else to do it for me. Again, the book is called You Are the One. It's available just by clicking on the banner ad at onesimplething.online.com. You'll see it on the right side of the page. Also, it's at the top of today's show notes, episode 566. Again, when you go to onesimplething.online.com. Thanks for listening, you guys. Dave Kirby with you. I'll welcome Kute back on the program again on the next episode as we again show you the way to taking better control of your life and then going out and changing the world through love. Hopefully you'll join me next time here on the One Simple Thing podcast.